There were quite a few disappointments in the 2023 MLB season, whether it was players refusing to play or first-round draft picks underperforming. Today we'll look at the biggest disappointments of 2023. I'm starting it off a bit controversial with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I know a lot of people might disagree on this, so let me explain. In 2021, it was really its only MVP caliber year with 48 home runs and an OPS over 1,000. But the thing is, that year in 2021, the Blue Jays also played in a Little League ballpark and couldn't travel to Toronto because of COVID restrictions. Yes, he had some good years, like in 2022, he had an 818 OPS, but he had so much hype and promise around him, and he hasn't lived up to it. In 2023, his OPS was 788, and he had 26 home runs. That stat line might be good for a guy like Dansby Swanson, who has elite defense, but that's not the case for Vlad. He was one of the worst defenders and still is in the game, with negative 13 outs above average in 2023. Alek Manoah was probably the most disappointing pitcher from 2023. Following his Cy Young candidate season of a 2.24 ERA and a .99 WHIP, he put up a 5.87 ERA and a 1.74 WHIP. His problem was walking hitters. He got himself into jams all the time. He was bottom 3 percentile in walk percentage. He would walk two guys, leave up a double or a 3-run shot. It was those type of things. He's not like Blake Snell where you can walk the bases loaded or walk a guy on first and second and strike out a ton of batters, strike out the next three, and get out of the inning. In 2022, he pitched 196 innings and only had 180 strikeouts. In 2023, he pitched 87 innings and only had 79 strikeouts. So like I said, he's not that huge strikeout guy. And expectations honestly might have been set too high for Alek Manoah because, yeah, he had that 2.24 ERA in 2022. But I think we all expected too much. I think we expected him to follow that up. But a 5.87 ERA is what nobody expected from Alek Manoah. Another disappointing signing, Jose Abreu. He had a 680 OPS in 2023, which was the lowest of his career. His lowest OPS before that in his career was 2018. It was a 798. From 2014 to 2022, Abreu's career OPS was 860. His batting average in 2023 was also a 237, and his on-base didn't even reach 300. He sucked in the field with negative 6 outs above average, and not to mention he's making $19.5 million a year from the Astros. This next one might be unexpected because it's Adam Wainwright. He's on here because he was supposed to retire in 2022 with the big three of Albert Pujols and Yadier Molina and obviously Adam Wainwright. But he decided to come out for another year and go for his 200th win, which was selfish in my opinion. And at what cost did he get his 200th win? He had a 740 ERA and a 190 WHIP. He pitched 101 innings and only had 55 strikeouts. He was awful for the Cardinals. He was 5-11 for his record, so obviously he made the Cardinals worse. And the Cardinals weren't going to say, you know what, man? We're not going to pitch you anymore. We're not going to let you get the 200th win. We're going to cut you. They had to pitch him every 1 in 5 days so he could get that 200th win. He barely got it. He got it at the end of the season. So they, like I said, they had to pitch him 1 in 5 days. And every single time he went out, he sucked and he made the Cardinals worse. It was a horrible decision that he made, and the Cardinals felt bad, and they just had to pitch him. I'm going to read you some baseball savant stats real quick. He was bottom 1 percentile in expected ERA, bottom 1 percentile in expected batting average, bottom 1 percentile in fastball velocity, chase percentage, bottom 2%, and bottom 1% in whiff and K percentage. He was one of the worst pitchers I've ever seen this season. One of the biggest disappointments of the 2023 season was Jazz Chisholm Jr. He's one of the biggest loudmouths in the game, but can never back it up. I personally despise him. I can't stand him. He does way too much for being mid for when he plays. He only played 97 games in 2023 and 60 games in 2022. Not to mention he was on the cover of MLB The Show in 2023, which just adds to the overhype surrounding him. His OPS this year in 2023 was a 761. He also talked mad shit leading to the playoffs and then went 0 for 8. I have no problems with guys who showboat like Acuna and can back it up. But Jazz, he's really just bad for baseball. Yeah, Carlos Rodon was supposed to be that big piece for the Yankees. They lacked starting pitching. They had Garrett Cole and Rodon, who were supposed to be that 1-2 punch and the scary 1-2 punch, until they weren't, because Garrett Cole did his part winning the Cy Young, but Rodon did nothing, having a 6.85 ERA and was injured the whole year. I think in 2024 he bounces back with maybe like a 4 ERA, but I don't think he goes back to Cy Young 2.37 ERA in 2021 and a 2.88 ERA in 2022, because he's pitching in Yankee Stadium now. And he just, after the year that he had and battling through injuries, and now he's going into age 32 season, I just can't see him having an ERA below 3. But the Yankees really need him to step up because they have Garrett Cole, Marcus Stroman, and now they can have Carlos Rodon. That rotation could be scary in the playoffs. This next one's pretty sad to see. Chris Bryant, because he had so much potential and talent, but wasted it. He got his money and then refused to play with the Rockies. In 2023, he only played 80 games and had a 680 OPS, even though he played at Coors Stadium, which is known as a hitter-friendly ballpark. His batting average was a 233 with only 10 home runs. He somehow managed to have a negative 6 outs above average, even though he only played half the season. It just sucks to see because he was the face of the Cubs along with Baez, Rizzo. He won MVP, Rookie of the Year, won that World Series drought with the Cubs. But then after he was traded in 2022, it was like he became a whole different person and chose money over the game and the fans. There was a little bit of a debate for me if I wanted to put Carlos Correa on this list because he did help the Twins win a playoff series. But you got to take in consideration that he had an awful regular season at a 7.11 OPS and only hit 230. And in 2022, he had the 8.33 OPS. Is this the fall off of Carlos Correa? Because he is battling injuries with a foot injury and a shin injury. You saw the Mets and you saw the Giants sign a contract, and then he went through a physical, and they declined the contract because they saw something that they didn't like. But the Twins ended up re-signing him again, and that was a mistake at least for 2023. I don't think it'll be this bad with a 7.11 OPS, but he's only 29 years old, and he's already falling off a little bit. I hope that this isn't the end for Carlos Correa. I hope to see him bounce back in 2024. Tim Anderson is my next player. He could have had one of the worst offensive seasons of all time with a 582 OPS and one home run in 123 games. One home run. He was also terrible in the field and had negative 2 outs above average, so contributed nothing there. And his batting average was down to a 245 with an on-base percentage of 286. It was his first year since 2019 that his batting average was below 300. And on top of that, he got knocked out by Jose Ramirez. Jameson Taillon is going to make my list just because the Cubs gave him a $68 million contract for 4 years. That's the only reason why he's on here. If it was like a 4-year deal for only like $30 million, he wouldn't be on this list. There's just too much expectations on him going in 2023 because the Cubs had no pitching besides Marcus Stroman, and there were still question marks around Marcus Stroman. So they were desperate, gave Taillon a big contract, and he put up the worst ERA of his career with a 4.84. But for me, I don't see this as disappointing, but I know because this is what I expected from Jameson Taillon, a 4 ERA. But in general, he's a disappointment just because of what the Cubs paid him. My next player is Andrew Benintendi. He signed a 5-year, $75 million deal with the White Sox and had a 6.82 OPS in his first year. He had 5 home runs and a 3.26 slugging in 2023. It was an overpay to begin with, but now it's just to the point where Benintendi is just stealing money from the White Sox. He also is one of the worst defenders and had negative 11 outs above average in 2023. He usually sits around league average defensively, so it's very surprising to see Benintendi with that low outs above average. This next one's a little bit different because it's Sixto Sanchez, and he didn't even pitch in 2023, which is why he was so disappointing because he hasn't pitched. He had his future all lined up, and injuries have held him back. I'm not going to blame him for that. I am going to blame him because he's fat. He can't even touch 90 miles per hour anymore. When he was 22 years old, he just looked young. He looked skinny. He looked like he was an absolute stud, touching 100 miles per hour. You pull up a picture of him now at age 26. He doesn't even look like the same person. He doesn't touch 90. He just is so fat, and he just looks like he's 40 years old. He had so much hype around him because he was traded for JT Realmuto, and the worst thing happened for the Marlins because he hasn't pitched. He hasn't pitched a single inning since 2020 in the major leagues. There was a point in time in 2021 where the Phillies needed another starting pitcher, and at the deadline, they ended up getting Kyle Gibson. They needed another stud pitcher to make a playoff push, and I wanted Sixto Sanchez back, but I thank God every day that they traded Sixto Sanchez for JT Realmuto. On to the next player, Javier Baez. I didn't think Javier Baez could have gotten much worse after 2022, but somehow he managed to. In 2023, he had a 593 OPS, 9 home runs, a 267 on-base percentage, and a 222 average. From 2017 to 2021, in an average 162-game span, he had an 815 OPS, 32 home runs, and a 503 slugging. This means his slugging from 2017 to 2021 was almost as high as his OPS in 2023. That just puts in perspective how bad of a year it was for Javier Baez. This dude doesn't know how to have an approach. He doesn't know how to lay off sliders outside. It's so frustrating to watch, and I'm not even a Tigers fan. The Tigers are basically paying Javier Baez $25 million a year to have an elite defense, which they could get for like $5 million. Yeah, Starling Marte is going to make my list. He only had a 6.25 OPS and only hit 248. The only thing he did good for the Mets is steal 24 bases. When he played, he sucked, and he didn't even want to play for the Mets. He looked like he was faking injuries. Mets fans hated him this year, and I don't blame them. This next player, I would debate if I wanted to put him on here, but Manny Machado. Not only were his stats pretty disappointing, but he also failed as a leader as a Padres, which is mainly why I have him on this list. Their team fell apart, and Machado just let it happen. I know he tried to step in a couple times, but he just didn't do enough. He did 7.82 OPS, even though he hit 30 home runs. His numbers just weren't good enough compared to the money he's being paid from the Padres. He wouldn't be on this list, like I said, though, if the Padres made the playoffs and didn't fall apart like they did. On to Jeff McNeil. I chose him because in 2022, he won the batting title with a 326 batting average and had an OPS plus of 140. I had to double check that. A 140 OPS plus for a guy who's not even known for power. But in 2023, his batting average dropped to 270, and his OPS plus dropped to below league average at 96. His on-base percentage was down along with his slugging, despite hitting more home runs in 2023. Another guy who's in it for the money, Anthony Rendon. He's just terrible for baseball. He's just retired at this point. His most games played since 2020 is 58, and his highest OPS since 2021 is 712. He was terrible defensively with -5 outs above average in only 50 games in 2023. He has come out and said he hates baseball, thinks the season is too long, they should shorten the season. He's just stealing money from the Angels, and if I was the Angels, I would personally cut him. I had a tough time putting this player on the list too, Nolan Arenado. It was a down year for him offensively in 2023. He had a 7.74 OPS with 26 home runs and a 266 batting average, but it really wasn't that bad of a year. The Cardinals are just paying him to do more than they did in 2023. His outs above average was still very, very good, above league average at 5. It's just he usually has upwards of 15, and people are just putting the standard of Nolan Arenado and saying like 5 is not Nolan Arenado. It's still really, really good. So I can see if you make an argument that Nolan Arenado is not disappointing, and personally, you could probably persuade me and say Nolan Arenado's season wasn't disappointing.